Hey guys, my name is Alec and today I'm going to be showing you how to do an oil change on your 2019 through 2023 Suzuki RM-Z250. So in these particular RM-Zs, it's recommended that you change the oil every 6 hours and the oil filter every 12 hours. So before we get started, we're going to want to make sure we got the correct oil and the correct tools for the job. And remember, you can never be too smart or too cool to use the owner's manual. Everything's in here, it's super helpful to have. We got a ratchet, an 8mm, a 12 and a 14 socket, a pick to make life a little easier, a torque wrench, and then also for my convenience, an 8mm T-handle, parts cleaner, and a rag. So the first thing we want to do is make sure we get this engine nice and warm so this oil drains correctly. Now Suzuki recommends you start this engine and let it idle for about 3 minutes. So we're going to fire it up. So right here beneath our gear shifter we have our oil drain screen, and then below that is our first drain plug, and then up here is our second drain plug, and then on the other side of the engine we have an oil filter. So we're going to start by taking this drain plug and cracking that loose. So starting here with our big 14mm, we're going to just crack that one loose. And then the oil is going to start draining out of that one. So once that one's draining and you got your plug out, you're going to move on with your 12mm. And then you can crack that one. Sometimes the little screen tends to get stuck in here, so you could take a pick, screwdriver, whatever you got, and just pull that guy out. So there's our screen. So now that we have all these on our rag, this is a good time to check your crush washers, which are just little washers right here. And they're reusable only a certain number of times. You can see this is a copper one on here, as well as a copper one on the screen. And you want to make sure these are freely removable. If they get stuck to the bolt, then they should be replaced, and if they're too smashed up, they should also be replaced. The first thing we're going to do is clean this screen. So you can see it's really important to clean the screen on these bikes, as they do get some metal debris caught in them, which is their job. So I usually like to clean these. I just spray them down with some parts cleaner and then blow through it with some air. Make sure this thing is all spotless when you go to put it back in. So now we've had time to clean up all our drain bolts here. Make sure our screen is clean. We inspect all these crush washers and make sure they're clean. See how that spins right around there? If it's stuck or it looks like it's damaged, you definitely want to replace these. You can get these at your local dealership. It doesn't really matter what brand. They're pretty universal for any metric motorcycle or power sport. So now that we've got our oil draining out, we're going to go ahead and get to the other side of the bike, over on the oil filter. Now before you take this off, it's important to note that if your bike is dirty, you could have some dirt around here, and you definitely don't want that falling in anywhere. So you want to spray that all down and make sure everything is nice and clean, because getting any sort of dirt or contaminants in there is definitely not going to help the longevity of your engine. So once you got that all cleaned out, you can go ahead and crack these 8mm bolts loose. Just be sure not to lose that little spring in here. And then when you have this out, it's always good to inspect this rubber O-ring here and make sure there's no rips or tears in it. And if there's any sort of damage, you want to replace that right away. So I get behind it and then pop it off. And then you can take your filter out. So once the filter's out, I always like to just take a rag and get any residual oil out of here. So take your new filter and then just put a little bit of new motor oil right around the O-ring here. I just usually get it everywhere. Make sure it's inside, outside, all around, and then this can go right back in place. So now that we got our cover back on, we want to make sure we tighten this thing up nice and evenly so we don't pinch the O-ring. So we go a little back and forth on this cover. And then once it's snugged up, you want to make sure you torque it down to the proper spec, which is 11 Newton meters or 8.5 foot-pounds. And I do a little bit at a time on each. So back underneath the bike, our larger oil drain plug is going to be at 15.5 foot-pounds or 21 Newton meters. And our smaller one right up here is going to be at 9 foot-pounds or 12 Newton meters. Back over to our strainer bolt, we're going to want to torque this one down to 15.5 foot-pounds or 21 Newton meters. So as you can see right here on the oil filter cap, it calls for 1100 milliliters with the filter. So we're going to go ahead and start adding our oil. We can take off our fill. So we just got done adding our oil, and then now we're going to need to check the level with this check bolt back here. It's another 8 millimeter, and then you can see there's a sight glass right here. So we're going to fire this thing up and let it run for about 3 minutes and then check that oil. So now that we've let the bike run, we're going to go ahead and crack this little 8 millimeter loose. So you can see down in here I have this cracked loose and no major oil came out, and it's totally full on our sight glass. So we can go ahead and just tighten this one back up. You don't need to take it all the way out. You just want to make sure it's loose enough that oil can come out of it if it needs to. Alright guys, so that's all there is to it. Our oil and our filters all changed on our RM-Z, so it's time to go ride. Stay safe out there.